Welcome in, and thank you for joining us for today's deep dive. We have a genuinely compelling journey mapped out for you today.
Yeah, we really do. It's a wild one.
It is. So our mission today is to figure out exactly who, or maybe what is a better word, the entity known as Hullut Muusikot actually is.
Right.
We're going to uncover the deeply historical, almost mystical well of their inspiration and really try to understand the machinery behind their drive to create this incredibly unique blend of music and video.
It's definitely not your standard project.
Not at all. And to pull this off, we've got a fascinating stack of material on the table. We're pulling from the band's official website. We're dissecting their pretty extensive Bandcamp discography and sifting through a massive treasure trove of their YouTube community posts.
Oh, the YouTube stuff is incredible.
Yeah, all the track listings and visual updates. So as we get into this, I want you to keep this question in the back of your mind. What happens when you collide century-old Finnish poetry with blistering post-punk avant-garde noise and theatrical absurdism?
It is a collision that absolutely demands your full attention. And I think it's crucial to establish right up front that this isn't your standard band profile.
Right.
We aren't analyzing a group of musicians trying to, engineer a radio hit or optimize for a Spotify playlist.
Yeah, definitely not.
This is a much deeper exploration into how modern, boundary-pushing art can breathe entirely new life into history. It's about how the past can be reinterpreted and weaponized in ways that are, frankly, quite startling.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
Because the very first revelation from their materials completely redefines the lens we need to view them through. So, Hullut Muusikot hails from Joensuu, Finland, and right out of the gate on their official site, they explicitly state, and I'm quoting here, "We are not a rock band, but we create visual and musical experiences."
Yeah, they completely reject the traditional musical label from day one.
Exactly.
And you hear a lot of avant-garde or experimental groups claim they transcend rock, right? It's used as a marketing gimmick.
Oh, constantly. It's almost a trope at this point.
Yeah, exactly. But what convinced me that Hullut Muusikot actually means it is how they execute their sonic profile. They describe themselves as a full-blown sonic circus.
A sonic circus. I love that.
And an explosive concoction. They aren't just blending genres, they are deliberately fracturing them.
Right.
They aren't interested in staying in one lane because the concepts they are tackling are just too large for a standard four-chord rock structure.
And the genres they are fracturing make for a massive, unpredictable melting pot. I mean, we're talking about experimental rock, deeply avant-garde sensibilities, the raw, aggressive speed of punk, and this incredibly heavy dose of theatrical absurdism.
They demand that you keep up with them.
They really do.
What's fascinating here is the sheer level of contradiction built into their identity. They operate almost entirely in extremes.
Yeah, there's no middle ground.
Right. In one breath, you are listening to music that is completely chaotic, just a wall of absolute noise. And in the next measure, it resolves into something surprisingly melodic and delicate.
It gives you whiplash.
It does. They veer unpredictably from these frenetic, aggressive grooves straight into harsh dissonance. And just as your ear adjusts to the noise, they hit you with slapstick humor.
Which is so jarring.
It is, but then it dissolves into a moment of profound, genuine beauty. It is a masterclass in tension and release.
To give you a sense of what this actually feels like, imagine you're shuffling a massive, completely uncurated playlist.
Good analogy.
Picture jumping from a soothing, atmospheric, ambient track, something that feels like cold, empty space, directly into a blistering, distorted punk anthem in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, no transition at all.
Exactly. That whiplash, that sheer unpredictability, that is the core experience of listening to Hullut Muusikot. You look at their track listings and you see a title like Medellin Massivi, which translates to a massive wall of noise.
Right.
And it's sitting right alongside a track that translates to a call from a sea of flowers. You are never given the comfort of knowing what emotional frequency they're going to broadcast next.
Which requires an immense amount of trust from you, the listener, but it also ensures that you are never a passive participant.
You definitely can't put this on in the background while you answer email.
No, absolutely not. You are constantly on your toes, waiting to see which act of the sonic circus is going to take center stage. They face you to be present.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You have this avant-garde, boundary-pushing, noisy, highly theatrical collective from Joensuu. So what is actually fueling all this chaos and beauty?
That's the million-dollar question.
They aren't writing tracks about modern breakups or partying. Their primary inspiration, the absolute engine of their entire project, is early 20th century Finnish literature and poetry.
It's amazing.
This isn't just a casual aesthetic choice. It is the structural foundation of their art.
It is a staggering undertaking. They are essentially functioning as musical archaeologists.
Musical archaeologists, yes.
But instead of dusting off these century-old poems and putting them behind museum glass for quiet contemplation, they are plugging them into modern amplifiers and turning the distortion all the way up.
The sheer volume of work they have dedicated to this single theme is incredible. We're looking at entire albums built around historical figures and concepts.
Massive amounts of material.
Yeah, you have the album Ella Nerva, dedicated to the pioneering Finnish poet and writer. There's Eero Helakoski. There's Valoisa Javarosa, which means enlightened shadow.
Beautiful title.
There's Tayo, meaning work. And then there is this incredibly sweeping, ambitious, ongoing project called Runo Suomi, or Poetry Finland.
The Runo Suomi project is particularly vital to understanding their ethos.
Tell us about that.
Well, this album is the third installment in a series entirely dedicated to honoring Finland's poetic legacy. And they aren't picking obscure, forgotten verses. They are taking on the absolute heavyweights of the Finnish literary canon.
The giants.
Right. They are creating new musical interpretations for works by Aino Leino, Edith Sodergran, Jaakko Jutaini, Saima Harmaja, Alexis Kivi, and J.L. Runeberg.
Just massive names.
To put that in perspective for you, taking on J.L. Runeberg or Alexis Kivi is akin to an American avant-garde noise band doing a fractured post-punk interpretation of Walt Whitman or Edgar Allan Poe.
Wow, yeah.
These are foundational voices of the nation's cultural identity.
The approach they take to the actual composition is what makes this so effective, I think. Taking a classic poem and just reading it over a generic driving rock beat would be the easy way out.
It would feel like a novelty.
Exactly. But they do something much more complex.
A novelty approach would completely miss the emotional weight of the texts. Instead, they craft every single track to explicitly match the internal emotional state of the specific poem they are interpreting.
The music serves the poem.
Completely. The musical arrangement is entirely subservient to the text. If the poem is grappling with existential dread, the style shifts dramatically to serve that. They might use a dissonant, heavily down-tuned metal riff.
Or if they drift into Koki linen.
Right, the Finnish term for experimental rock.
Yeah, they might pull from that eerie, spacey tradition of 1970s krautrock, using a repetitive, hypnotic drum beat to build incredible tension beneath the century-old lyrics.
Or they might tap into nostalgic, sparse folk music before just exploding into furious noise. They are using their genre fluidity not to show off, but as a mechanical tool to translate the emotion of the text.
To really ground this, let's look at how they tackle specific poets, starting with their 2025 album dedicated entirely to Katri Vala.
A fascinating album.
Vala was a central figure in early 20th century Finnish poetry, known for her passionate, vivid imagery. And Hullut Muusikot treats this album with what is described as a highly cosmic approach.
Cosmic is the perfect word.
The arrangements are packed with ecstatic energy. They use this incredible blend of layered musical textures and chaotic percussion to create a feeling of what is perfectly described as surreal beauty and melancholic fire.
Melancholic fire.
Yeah, you can almost hear the shimmering, distorted guitars cutting through heavy, rhythmic drumming to create that exact sensation.
That phrase captures it perfectly, but then look at how dramatically they pivot when you contrast that cosmic, ecstatic energy with the album they dedicated to Uno Kailas.
A total 180.
Kailas was a poet whose work was often overshadowed by illness, depression, and a deep sense of alienation. Hullut Muusikot doesn't apply the cosmic, surreal approach to him.
Not at all.
The Uno Kailas project is a raw, heavy, introspective journey. It dives straight into themes of identity, madness, and profound isolation. It is an uncompromising exploration of the human psyche where the harshness of the noise and the despair of the poetry become completely intertwined.
The track list for the Uno Kailas album alone gives you a sense of that weight. You have tracks like Nari, meaning the gesture, Aika, or time,
right.
Sisamu, which is autumn morning, and Silmian Vidajat, the eye exchangers.
That last title alone.
The eye exchangers. It is deeply unsettling and evocative. The music here feels both intimate and mythic. They pair deeply personal, existential poetry with these atmospheric, heavy soundscapes.
When they tackle a poem about isolation on that album, they aren't just playing sad chords in a minor key. They are using specific dissonant guitar tunings and sparse percussion that literally mimics the auditory sensation of sitting in a ringing, empty room.
Wow.
They construct the physical space of the poem through the music, and this brings us to the core motivation behind all of this effort.
Right.
Why go through the immense, painstaking process of translating complex, existential 1920s poetry into avant-garde rock and dissonant metal?
The band actually provided a direct answer to that. Their spokesperson stated, quote, "Our mission has always been to reconnect contemporary audiences with the emotional currents of the past. Their words are still alive, and we help them scream, sing, or weep in new ways."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a deeply profound philosophy about how we interact with history.
How so?
The band views these poets not merely as historical writers, but as the original architects of the Finnish soulscape, or Sielunmaisema.
Sielunmaisema.
Yes. These writers were grappling with the universal human condition. The crushing weight of existential dread, the desperate search for moments of beauty, the terrifying proximity of madness. Those base emotions haven't changed in 100 years. What has changed is our auditory vocabulary.
Right. The way a modern audience processes the feeling of isolation is entirely different from how an audience in 1925 processed it.
Precisely. If isolation in the 1920s felt like the silence of a snowed-in cabin, today, to a modern listener, isolation might feel like cold, sparse ambient synthesizers or the overwhelming sensory overload of a wall of static.
That makes total sense.
Hullut Muusikot bridges that 100-year gap for your brain. The music acts as a translation vehicle. They take that century-old dread and beauty and map it onto modern sonic cues so that a contemporary listener can actually feel the poem vibrating in their bones, rather than just intellectually understanding it on a page.
They were literally giving a new voice to the ghosts of the past, letting them scream and weep through modern circuitry. But to fully understand Hullut Muusikot, we have to look beyond the audio.
We do.
Remember their defining statement. They create visual A&D musical experiences. The visual element isn't an afterthought or a promotional add-on. It is half of the equation.
It's vital.
When you dive into their YouTube channel, the sheer scale of their visual output is staggering. They have a massive catalog of videos tied to their various EPs. EPs with evocative titles like Tuulenkantajat, which means the Fire Bearers.
Such a great name.
Yeah, Halloween, Lappi or Lapland, and Vikinki, meaning Viking.
And they don't just release an audio track with a static image and call it a day, which is what you might expect from a highly independent avant-garde collective.
Right, usually it's just the album cover.
Exactly. For major projects like the Uno Kaila's album, they produce striking, fully realized music videos for every single release. The objective is to visually interpret these evocative, heavy themes. It turns the entire thing into a multi-sensory experience.
So you aren't just listening.
You're not just hearing the words of a century-old poem sung over experimental rock. You are actively stepping into the physical and emotional environment where that poem was born. They build a complete, cohesive world around the text.
I was really struck by how they handle their YouTube presence outside of the official music videos, too. They have these wonderful, slightly surreal, short updates on their channel, where they playfully imagine these historic literary figures interacting with the modern world.
Those are fantastic.
There are videos where they imagine Katrivala and Uno Kailas themselves hanging out at a place called Branda.
Right, Branda.
Which historically was the actual restaurant and cultural hub where the Tuulenkantajat literary group would meet in the 1920s. In these videos, the historical figures are sitting at Branda, exchanging eyes, and listening to Hullut Muusikot's modern performances.
It is simultaneously hilarious, deeply clever, and a little bit terrifying.
It really is.
It is a brilliant way to blur the line between the historical architects of the poetry and the modern performers interpreting it. By placing Kailas and Vala in the same room as the sonic circus, they're visually demonstrating that the past and the present are in constant conversation.
I love that.
It breaks down the reverence we usually reserve for historical figures and makes them immediate, tangible, and flawed again.
So, bringing this all back to you, the listener, why should you invest your time in a sonic circus from Jeonsu?
Why should they care?
I think it's because in an era where we are constantly fighting information overload and historical detachment, Hullut Muusikot provides a visceral antidote. They prove that history absolutely does not have to be a dry, dusty textbook.
Never.
History can be a loud, theatrical, and deeply unpredictable experience that grabs you by the collar and demands you feel something about the people who lived 100 years before you.
It completely reframes how we think about the preservation of culture. Preservation usually implies keeping something safe, static, and untouched. Hullut Muusikot argues that true preservation requires friction. It requires taking the artifact out of the box and seeing how it holds up against the chaos of the modern world.
Just to quickly recap the incredible territory we've covered today, we started by exploring this enigmatic collective from Joensuu, Finland, a group that entirely rejects the traditional rock label to operate as a boundless, unpredictable sonic circus.
Right.
We unpacked their massive genre-fracturing sound. And we discovered that the true engine driving their chaos and beauty is a deeply ambitious dedication to resurrecting the ghosts of Finnish poetry.
It's quite a legacy.
They take the foundational words of literary giants and filter them through a lens of avant-garde noise, post-punk energy, and striking world-building visual storytelling.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
Yeah. Ultimately, I think Hullut Muusikot shows us the immense untapped value of looking backward in order to push art forward. True innovation in music or visual art doesn't always require inventing a completely new form out of thin air.
No, not always.
Sometimes the most deeply innovative thing an artist can do is find the most chaotic, beautiful, and unexpected way to echo the past. By honoring the emotional weight of history through boundary-defying, multisensory art, they ensure those century-old voices never actually fade into silence.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. And it leaves me with a final lingering thought for you to turn over in your mind long after we wrap up today.
What's that?
If a theatrical experimental punk collective can take a 100-year-old poem about isolation and make it scream, sing, and weep in an entirely new, electrifying way,
Yeah.
what other forgotten texts are out there? Think about all the old diaries, the centuries-old letters, the obscure historical texts just sitting in dark, climate-controlled archives somewhere.
Waiting to be found.
They are all just waiting for the right sonic circus to come along and translate their emotional core for a modern audience. Could it be that the future of preserving our history doesn't actually lie in the quiet halls of museums, but in the loud, unpredictable hands of avant-garde noise musicians?
It's entirely possible.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you next time.